Hello and welcome back to First Principles. This is the 47th episode since we started, or the 5th episode of Season 3. My guest today is someone who, when I first invited him, said he wasn't sure he was qualified to be on a podcast about entrepreneurship. That's because he's a lawyer. But Rahul Matthan is not just any lawyer. He's one of the 6 co-founders of Trilegal, a firm they started 25 years ago that has since grown to become one of India's largest and most respected full-service law firms. Lawyers are notorious for being cagey about on-the-record conversations, especially with journalists. But Rahul and I turned out to have a wonderful, no questions are off limits conversation, through which I uncovered hidden lessons of entrepreneurship from a profession we don't usually associate with building ventures. Rahul spoke with clarity, conviction, candidness, and vulnerability on the unique complexities of creating and managing a purely professional services business, an organization where your people are your product. We get into the nitty-gritty of scaling such a firm, managing the classic rainmaker risk, and the counterintuitive incentive structures they built, like their radical all-equity partnership model where every partner is an owner. What makes Trilegal story so compelling is the power of compounding principles. From the foundational decision not to name the firm after its founders to instilling a powerful firm before self culture, Rahul and his co-founders made unconventional choices driven by strong long-term beliefs. These choices, made decades ago, have been instrumental in their journey from just 6 partners to over 1,000 professionals today. So, how do you build a lasting institution in a business traditionally built on individual superstars? And what can founders of all kinds learn from a lawyer's unique approach to entrepreneurship? Let's find out. I'm Rohin, Dharmakumar, your host, and this is First Principles. I want to go back to culture and, the first 20 years, you've said, you worked very hard to build and preserve a culture. And then one of your apprehensions, rightly as a founder, was that if you scale dramatically, like 3x this thing, and you bring in a lot of people from the outside, the culture might suffer. That said, I'm sure there were learnings, to put it mildly, when you go from 300 to 1,000 plus people, because suddenly you have this. So if you were to just look at it from like a numerical point of view, you have 300 people who have a certain culture. And of course, institutionally more 2 decades of it. But suddenly you have 600 more people who are a different culture. And if you see them, if you visualize them as the mixing of 300 people with 600 people, I'm sure it must have led to either tensions or diffusing, because these are all people at the end of the day, and you are a fundamentally people-oriented business. What happened to the culture when 300 people who were there suddenly got introduced over time with another 600, 700 people, and what happened of it?
So, look, I think the people who really get introduced are the 140 partners, right? So the rest are associates. And these associates, there's a small percentage of them, say 10%, maybe 5%, that can actually graduate into partner. But the others are associates. And the associates, some of them last for 2 years, some of them last for 7 years. A small percentage of them will last for 10 years and then become partner. But then the rest is, I wouldn't say a floating population, but some of them go out and do further studies. Some of them just don't make it. They're not as good as it's required, and they move to other firms. And that population, which is 1,100 minus the 140, that population is much easier to manage as far as culture is concerned because they're much younger. And a lot of them we hire we hire straight from law school. Others we hire because we have a requirement. But they're subject to all the cultural legal process requirements any organization has. What's harder to manage is partner culture. Because the partner comes in, the partner is a revenue center, the
So
partner
it's almost
also has
like
a team.
subculture.
It could become a subculture, but I'm very happy to say that that's not the case in Trilegal. So the 140, soon to become 150, because we're in the middle of our partner selection process right now, that group of people are so let me back up. I think it's important to clearly identify what your culture is, and we for the first 10 years never wrote it down. We then did an exercise, I think 15 years on, to got a consultant as you do, and you do all this mission, vision, all this stuff. We came up with our values statement, and it was a remarkably simple thing to do because we all just agreed. I mean, we knew this was, and so the management did this exercise with a consultant, and then when we took it to the partners, once again, no one disagreed. They were like, yes, this is exactly what our values. So there was no debate around.
Was that joke about the professional consultants who sell you a watch to tell you the time or something?
No, but we
like
needed that, because we didn't know this process. So as much as
I get it. It's a good consultant if at the end of the day there is no dissonance between what they tell you and what you've already felt as part of your culture.
Correct. And actually, the value that they added was to say that you need to write it down. And that's extraordinarily important. So it was unwritten for the founders. I think the founders came together because we shared these values. It then was unwritten for all the partners up until that time that we did it, because when we wrote it down and announced it at a partner meeting, there was absolutely no disagreement. Not a single breath of disagreement, because they're like, look, this all makes a lot of sense. The firm before self, there was a disagreement in that surely you could have found one word to say this. But, but it was just that kind of stuff. It's not that anyone disagreed with that, but it was a complete endorsement. And having written that down, I think that's the first important thing as far as culture is concerned. I think very often we just let culture be this unsaid thing in the air, and that's not useful. You have to write it down. And once you've written it down, you sort of have to enforce it, because every now and then there are variations that may be okay, and then they cross a line. And then once it's written down, you can call that person, whoever that person is, and say, look, respect is one part of our culture. And you've got to respect the doorman. Just making a sort of an example out of my hat. But the guy in the lift who's coming up, you're very disrespectful to him. I'm sorry, but that's not part of our culture. And then you set a boundary, and everyone knows that that's the boundary. You're not punishing anyone. You're not doing anything like that. But you're just now emphasizing that.
It's an organization of lawyers.
Yeah.
So I guess writing it down helps, because otherwise lawyers always...
But I think any organization. I mean, if there's as I said, a lot of what we do is not perhaps fungible. As you can see, our equity structure is not fungible. But culture, I think, is fungible in any organization. And I think having spoken to many founders, many people, also, very experienced professionals, this is the one thing they say, that look, write down this culture thing, because it is, it gets life once it's written. Up until then, it's sort of there in the miasma. It's just there, floating around. But once you write it down and then you start interrogating it against different activities that happen, you can then figure out, look, this is aligned with the culture, this is not. And people change their behavior, because no one wants to behave in a way which is outside of the culture. If they did, then they'd leave the firm and do whatever they want to do. And some people perhaps believe that I don't need to respect people. I'm the boss. I don't need to respect people. They need to respect me, and I don't need to respect them. Well, you can do all of that stuff somewhere else, because this place is a place where you have to respect people. And it's two ways, right? The associate has to respect you. You have to respect the associate. We just have to be respectful. And I think that, I'm just taking respect as one example, but I think that point of writing it down, interrogating it, and then drawing clear lines that this is okay, this is not okay, that's very much part of, I think, building the...
You used a word just now, just a couple of sentences ago, the firm, right? It's a word which is uniquely associated with professional services firm, right? And yet in some ways, like, I mean, most of the conversations that I've had with founders, you're always referring to it as the company or the organization. What's the difference in your mind between how a firm operates in terms of culture and people versus how a company or organization operates?
So one, there's a technical reason, and that is we as lawyers are not allowed to set up corporate entities. We're required to set up a partnership firm. That's just the nature of it. You can have a partnership of professionals, and then you can incorporate an entity which does a business. And once again, coming back to business versus profession.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hard thing to explain, but this is one of the sort of the legal requirements. I think the point behind an association of professionals that is then called a firm is that we are individual profit centers in a way that a company is not. A company, you can fund the company. The person who brings the capital into the company, just by virtue of bringing the capital in, has some say. We fund our operations by the revenue we earn. We've never raised any equity. We've never taken any loan. We may have a working capital facility just for new office fit outs or something like that. But we're completely run on the income that every one of the 140 plus partners generates in the course of the year. This is not the same as companies, where you can have a financial investor who puts a large amount of money in with the sole intention of making an upside on that investment. And that investor will incentivize the management to do certain things to achieve that objective with no actual say in the delivery of the work or anything like that. So there's a bit of a mismatch in that structure between the capital and the management of the organization. There is not that with us. We are ourselves responsible for generating the revenue, which is doing the business development, getting a client to sign on to us, actually delivering the work to the client, actually collecting the fees once we've presented the bill. I mean, that's a big problem in the firm. Partners, of course, we've got a finance department that will chase up on the bills, but at the end of the day, the partner has to pick up the phone and say, look, I did this deal for you. I mean, we closed it successfully. Why have you delayed the bill? And very often that's all it takes. The client will say, no, absolutely, I'm sorry. I don't know why my internal department has done it. So all I'm trying to say is that partner, who is in a sense the software developer, the project manager, the managing director, all rolled into, and the business development team and the finance department, all rolled into one, is how the firm works. Whereas in a company, all of this can be disaggregated. Now, the success of our firm to operate at a scale of 1,000 lawyers is somehow finding the best of both. So we've got very strongly identified functional heads. We've got a business development department. We've got a finance department. We've got a HR department. We've got a finance department, IT, all the various functions that an organization requires. But they're all in support of the partner and that unit that the partner manages. The partner, his team of associates and etc., is largely supported by this. And I think, since I've never worked in a company, I can't say other than anecdotally, that this is the fundamental difference between the way the organization works, the corporate organization works, and the way a partnership organization works.
Got it. I'd like to switch over to a different topic now, which I'm sure you've been wrestling with for a while, which is AI. My bad. One of the professions where the impact of AI is sought to be, or at least assumed to be, fairly significant is the legal profession, because at the end of the day, if I were to kind of stupidly reduce it to its elements, it is interpreting text and generating text. I've reduced it to a dramatically, there is a world of complexity that lies between this. It's like saying programming is just generating characters or this thing, right? Well, obviously there's complexity. But that said, if you look at the promise of AI, increasingly for the last many months now, especially post Chat GPT 5's launch, GPT 5's launch, which was very lackluster, people have been saying that, look, I think the promise have been overstated, except for a couple of areas. One is, of course, coding, right, where action continues to be very hot. And the other area is the legal profession, where there are lots of legal AI startups globally, which have just been incredibly, raising money and growing their services and scale. So from the outside, it does look like AI is a fairly significant threat slash opportunity to legal firms. Again, from the same point of view as you're fundamentally a people-driven business. You grew, like you said, all of our conversation up till now has been around the number of people who are there, the number of partners who are there. In many ways, it's similar to how IT services is, where the number of people you hire, employ, deploy, etc. determines your. And AI comes in and says it's no longer about people, but it's really about the advice, or it's really about interpretation, etc. and all that. You don't need. Is there a world where you suddenly think that, look, we are like 1,000+ people and AI could potentially make it back to 300+ people operating with AI at the same level of efficiency? How do you look at AI? What have you been, as Trilegal, what's your view on it?
Yeah. So look, I both is Trilegal and also I'm a tech lawyer. So I've been using AI since before ChatGPT. Simple answer is yes and no. When the World Economic Forum did a survey, they said that the profession least likely to be disrupted by AI was nursing, and the profession second least likely to be disrupted by AI was lawyers. But if you go down that list, and the professionals second most likely to be disrupted was
lawyers,
paralegals, and first-year associates. So
entry-level jobs.
This is the critical thing. AI, and of course AI is going to get better, but at this current point in time, you said AI is about text and interpreting. And certainly at the low level.
At least the LLM version of AI that we are currently discussing.
Correct. So it's at the low level, absolutely, there's a lot of stuff that AI can displace. So if you think about paralegals, what is a paralegal supposed to do? A paralegal in many ways actually does a whole bunch of research and summarizes. And AI is way better than a paralegal at doing the research and summarizing. What do I do every day? I take these summaries, apply my experience, sometimes very orthogonally, in a way that I have used AI for, as I said, longer than ChatGPT. So I've been using it while it was still a command line interface and not in a chat interface. And ever since then, all the way to now, ChatGPT 5, I use ChatGPT 5 every single day. I use Claude, I use Perplexity, I use all the AI, including we've got our bespoke AI for Trilegal called Lucio. In all of that, the AI is nowhere close to replacing me, because I have a wealth of experience and I also have a human brain that thinks differently from a large language model, where I can create associations and provide answers in a way that the AI is not able to do. If you think that...
I get that. Sorry to interrupt you, Rahul. I go back to something that you said earlier, which is, I think, a perfect example of that. You talked about a client who comes to you and says that, can you do this? And your answer to the client is no, but if you redesign your network in this way and come back to me and ask me a different question, then my answer will be different. I'm saying that's the stuff that AI can't do, because in some ways, when you're looking at this information, let's say summaries which are generated and you're going on a tangent, you're essentially answering questions which have not been asked of you.
Exactly. I have never been asked in many instances. So let me give you one example. You know the 2G scam, right? And in the 2G scam, essentially the Supreme Court cancelled a whole bunch of licenses because they said spectrum is a scarce natural resource. Now, where are they getting this analogy from? From mining. Because the earth contains scarce natural resources. Now, the question of whether spectrum is like gold is not something that has ever been asked before.
Is it truly scarce?
How can it be scarce? Because it's not, what is this concept of finiteness? I mean, there's a certain amount of gold in the earth, and once you've mined all that gold, then that's it, it's over. Now, is spectrum the same way? Now, to be able to take a look at spectrum and say that, look, for 2G spectrum, there is only so much bandwidth that's available. And in a sense, even though this is not even air, this is just some electromagnetic frequency, there is a similar scarcity to gold when you're using it. Because if you have two telcos operating on the same frequency, you will not be able to hear anything because the calls are going to interfere. Now, that is not anywhere close to the fact that I've mined all the gold in the earth. But a lawyer at the level of someone who is arguing in the Supreme Court can make this analogy. And an LLM cannot make this analogy. This is the way the LLM works really is taking a very, very large amount of information, finding correlations between all of that information. And the reason why it is good is because it can hold in its context window or in its neural network such a vast amount of information that no human brain can hold that amount of information. And so it magically appears intelligent because it has the ability to draw connections between things that can't fit in our minds. We have the ability to imagine these connections. Even if I can't retain this information in my head, I have the ability to sort of get the shape. And I can say, look, this shape is similar, which is why I can draw an analogy between gold and the earth and electromagnetic spectrum, which is now a scarce resource. There is a whole raft of things that professional, experienced lawyers do like this on a daily basis. And this is what, in my view, the current generation of AI is not going to replace.
I get that. All
but
right.
there's a lot of stuff.
What happens below if you look at the organization?
That is exactly where the problem is. So there's a lot of stuff below. And to me, look, I think the question of whether we will be, from 1,000 lawyers move down to 300 is the issue is not whether AI will replace it.
Do you even worry about that?
Personally, I don't worry about it. And I tell you why. I think our problem really, and that's not just the law. I wrote an article very, very early on in my Mint column, which I called The Last Artisanal Lawyer. And going back to the point that law is an artisanal profession, and all professionals and so on, in that the way in which you become a lawyer is by training on the job. And so a good part of the way law firms are set up is by allowing people for the first 2 years of their professional life to just learn. I get very little value out of lawyers who have just joined the profession, other than the fact that I'm investing in the bright ones actually sticking on with us and becoming good and productive. So after in their third year, they start being productive because they've got 2 years worth of experience. I mean, they've done 5 years in law school, but 5 years in law school is giving them a understanding of all various, a wide range of different laws, and also very importantly, an understanding of how to do research and how to think. But when you come out into the real world and you're actually facing a client and a question that a client has, that first year associate has no way to answer that question because it involves a lot of understanding of how business works, understanding how people work, all these dynamics you learn over time. What's my real worry? My real worry is that AI will replace the jobs of the first and second year associates. And not just my firm, but every firm on the planet is designed around giving the third year 2 years worth of training on the job. And now when AI comes and takes all those jobs away, we have somehow to miraculously catapult ourselves into functioning third year associates who have not had the benefit of working and learning on the job for those first 2 years. So the real threat of AI to me is we are going to have to very quickly restructure the way we train people, restructure the way we get experience. The only way now we get someone who has that experience that you need to become a partner is by training on the job. If training on the job goes away, we still have to get people that expertise. And I don't know if anyone is thinking about
Yeah,
how
I
to
read
do
a
that.
very fascinating paper on this recently, which talked about exactly this organizational challenge, that if AI essentially disrupts entry level hiring, then how are firms going to build the pipeline for future talent? Because if you're not training people on the job, and if you're hiring laterally, let's say your example, at the third year level, if all firms are hiring at the third year level, where are they hiring from? And that pool is essentially, and that's one. Second is, you cannot expect that AI will get stuck at the 1 to 2 year. At some point, it will move up to the 3 to 4 year level. Then what are you going to do? If you move up and say we will constantly keep
I'm less.
hiring.
So what I'm worried about is that, look, we categorize first and second year lawyers as doing what I explained, summarization and providing summary. But that's not all they're doing. They're actually also sitting, they're doing the summarization, and they're sitting with the partner and listening on the call to understand how the partner is taking that summarization and translating that into advice. Now, you've taken away the summarization, and so you think that associate has no reason to exist. But actually, the real reason to exist is to sit in that client call. Now, are you going to then say that we're going to have AI do this stuff, and we're going to have associates just sit in, not doing the hard work of doing the summarization, just sit in and listen to the calls? Because really what you want them to, the value that you're building in them is that experience they get listening to the partner negotiate a transaction. The reason why they're sitting there is because they did the hard work and put that summary together. But that AI is doing, and so are you going to have AI sit in there and listen to it? Because AI doesn't get experience the same way a human being gets experience. And I think this is really the shift that we've got to figure out. We think that the job of an entry-level person can be taken by AI. But the purpose of the job is for higher level experience, which your AI is not going to get. But in replacing that lower level employee with AI, you're both denying AI, which would never get that experience in this way, the experience that you require to actually become a third and a fourth year, and you're also denying the person that experience, because that person would get the experience by doing the summary and then listening. And this, I think, is a fundamental conundrum. And I think the other thing to really understand is the distinction, because you made it, between coding and what lawyering requires, is that in coding you have direct feedback. And LLMs work perfectly with feedback, right? Essentially, LLM wants to make you happy, and so it gives you code that works. And if the code doesn't work, it immediately says, okay, now I get the feedback that it doesn't work, and so I'm going to change the code and give you something else. You don't get instant feedback with law. I put a transaction together, I won't know that it fails until 5 years from now when the parties have a dispute, and then they look at the contract and they say, oh, this clause is not there. So you can't get the kind of instant feedback in a transaction in the way that you will get when you're a human being sitting in and listening on the negotiation, and that other person says, look, I don't want this particular clause because whatever, this affects my ability to do certain things that I need as a founder. And then the investor will say, look, I don't want you to have those freedoms because the last founder I gave those freedoms to then went and ripped me off. Now, this sort of stuff is not the kind of feedback that an LLM can take in and usefully change the output of what it is doing. At least not the LLMs that I know. And we're very, very bullish on AI in the firm. And we've got a bespoke AI solution.
Yeah,
we use it for
you
a whole
mentioned
range
Lucio.
of things. It's called Lucio.
What is it? What does it do?
So it does a whole range of things. I mean, look, AI is extraordinarily useful in cutting down time in things that, quite frankly, no lawyer should be doing now that we've got AI. So I'll just give you one example. When we're doing a dispute, one of the things that you need to prepare for court is a timeline of the documents. And sometimes there are hundreds of documents. And the way you do it is there's some poor soul who will be sitting there and organizing the documents chronologically such that they can then present the timeline. AI does that in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Whereas this person would have taken 2 or 3 days when there's a large volume of documents. This is just one example of the many, many things that AI can actually do, which makes our life much easier. I would love for AI to do this kind of stuff because I don't really want that poor kid to get any experience out of wasting 2 days of his or her life organizing documents in chronological order. That kid, now that this is done, can now look at that chronology and draw all sorts of useful references to say that, look, the allegation was such and such, but they've made the allegation on such and such day. Actually, the incident occurred 2 days later. So it's wrong. And now I figured out that there's a way we can argue back against them. This is the sort of stuff that we really want the lawyers to do, not organizing the documents. And so you take a lot of the drudgery out of the legal profession, unnecessary drudgery, and AI can do that and do that really well and free people up to do stuff which they're better aligned to do. Now, because I had one person and that one person had to dedicate 2 days to doing something chronologically, I perhaps don't need to hire more people. So will the number of people that I have in the firm go down? Yeah, it may go down. But
has it already started happening?
Not at all.
Have you started relooking at associate hiring?
Not at all. It's unlikely to happen for us in the profession, because I think that.
So then where does I'm trying to reconcile your bullishness on AI. So again, speaking from the outside, if you're not planning to reduce your headcount and you're continuing to hire, and you're also bullish, so what is that investment of AI leading to then?
We do more work. We're highly efficient. See,
everything that's increasing productivity.
Absolutely. The whole thing that Trilegal is. See, when I gave you the World Economic Forum analogy, the point I was trying to make was that any profession, any human endeavor that is at the top end of the value chain will never be disintermediated by AI. The challenge is remaining there.
What does it mean when you say top end of the value chain?
There's a lot of the work that we do that we do because we don't have automation to do it for us. If we continue to do that work when automation comes, then we will be disintermediated, at least at that end of the operation. So I give you one example. We used to do a lot of venture capital work. And in those days, maybe I'd charge 15 lakhs for a document. And then one day, one of my VC clients came up to me and said, look, there's another firm that's doing it for 3 lakhs. That was the last venture capital deal I did, because I'd been disintermediated. I added value enough for a bunch of VCs to come to me and say, look, I want you to do my VC documentation, because this is the first time, VCs are coming into the country. We've got a Silicon Valley model. I don't know what the Indian model is. We need someone who is an expert to do it. And after we did that for about 3 or 4 or 5 years, it became cookie cutter. And so another law firm could just put all of this together without any of the overheads, and the VCs were okay with it, because for 5 years they'd used this model, nothing had gone wrong. Why should they still be paying this 5x amount of fees for something that someone else would do at a fifth of the price? And so I think it's hard to internally realize that something that you've been working on and has earned you a lot of money for 5 years is something that you should stop doing. But that's very early on in my profession. But ever since then, I've been constantly looking at. See, you are the only person who can disrupt yourself. Otherwise, you will be disrupted and you will no longer be operating in this sphere. So constantly looking to see where you are being disintermediated and moving higher up the value chain is the only way you will be able to stay ahead of the disruption that AI is causing. And I think that you can do that in a profession like this.
Got it. What's behind then the dramatic growth in fundraising, valuations, etc. of so many legal AI startups globally? What is the market that they're addressing, in your opinion?
So there are lots of inefficiencies in law. There's no doubt about that. And you've got to understand that legal startups serve two distinctly different markets. The vast majority of legal work that a company does, they will do in-house. So they have internal legal teams, and it's only when that internal legal team does not have the scale or the expertise that they will go to law firms. And so law firms, in my estimation, you can ask the in-house counsel in any of the companies that you speak to, but my estimation is we get no more than 5% of the total legal work that a company does. So in that 95%, there is a lot of optimization that can happen. So, you're doing an acquisition of a company, you'll get an AI startup to do the diligence. If it's a very significant acquisition where you really want to make sure that there's no liability, you'll get an external law firm to do it. We're much more expensive because we will eyeball all those contracts. And I think what you expect is that the AI will miss maybe 10%, but I can live with that, right? 10% risk I can live with. And if you're that kind of a firm, you just use AI to do your diligence and you will accept that AI will miss 10%. Now, at the same time, a lot of people say, but you've got a bunch of sleepy associates who are looking at this particular document at 3 a.m. after having done 2 night outs. They're likely to miss it as well. So look, I'd much rather an AI that's never sleepy, but that has a error rate of 10% over an associate who God knows whether he got out of the right side of the bed and is not looking at things okay, and which is the risk that I'm willing to take. But each organization will do this differently. So to answer your question, I think a lot of where this disruption is going to happen would first be in-house. I think the in-house legal departments of organizations will just not hire anymore. They will hire people who know how to use AI to do the things that they were previously hiring for. And that will be the first place to disrupt, because that's a much easier thing to do. When these organizations are looking outside for external help, of course, they will want the cost savings. And so they will insist on all of us as law firms using as much tech optimization that we can. And a good part of that is really AI. But they will not dilute one iota of the liability. So if I give a legal opinion, they will expect me to stand by that legal opinion, and they will sue me for not having delivered on that legal opinion. And I don't really care if you use AI or not. That's not my headache. You've got to give me the cheapest, the legal advice for the cheapest price that's possible, but at the same high quality. And so every law firm takes a call as to what it can optimize, how it can optimize. And if you're smart, you'll optimize with AI, and you'll optimize with AI in a way that you're not sacrificing on your liability, which is really, for us, the bottom line.
Got it. I'd like to switch to you, Rahul. And let's keep the topic on AI itself. You said you've been using AI even before ChatGPT, which makes you very rare, even among tech founders, etc. Right? And you're not a tech founder; you're a lawyer, even though you specialize in tech. You said Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Claude are the three, and a bunch of others that you use as well. What are your use cases? What do you use them every day for?
So as you know, I have written an article in the Mint every week since 2016.
And that's Ex Machina, the column.
The column. And it's got to the point where you'll never know how much of the article was, I wouldn't say written by AI, but how much of the article was due to AI. I chat with AI. But the workflow for my article now is I've got a long script that strangely works better in Claude than in ChatGPT. And Why
do you say strange? Because most of the people I know seem to swear more by Claude than ChatGPT, especially for
Claude
the last 6 months.
Claude is only good for this. One thing for me, which is this chatting that I do. So I say, look, I've got an idea for an article and such and such. Now, of course, Claude already knows that I write Ex Machina, so it has a good sense of what I write about and stuff like that. So it has a very nice conversation with me. It asks me, okay, now, what's the argument that you're making? And I'll write it back to them. And then I say, okay, now, are there any incidents? I said, no, I don't have any incidents. Can you search for me? Okay, there are these 3 incidents. Are these okay? I say, yeah, not this, something like this. And so I have a long conversation, not that long, maybe it's an hour. And at the end of that, I've got a pretty fleshed out outline. I won't use all of it, but a good portion of it I would not have got if it wasn't this conversation that I had with ChatGPT, with Claude. And then I write the article down, and then I open OpenAI, and I tell OpenAI, look, this is the article that I've written. Can you improve it for me? What's good? What's bad? This is what OpenAI is better at doing than ChatGPT, than Claude. And what OpenAI then does is, okay, this is a great article, this is the hook, etc. But look, you're rambling here. I think you should connect this a little bit better. And it gives me a very nice copy-edited article back. So then I go back and forth with OpenAI for a bit. And I'm going to say in maybe 3 or 4 hours, start to finish, I've got an article, which usually would take me the weekend to write. And so it's highly productive for me. I use it for all sorts of fact checking. I use it to learn. Every now and then there are new things that I need to. I mean, learn as in really learn.
What was the last thing that you used to learn it?
The last thing that I really went deep on is, for some strange reason, I've decided to move to Linux. And I wanted to
Which one, Ubuntu?
No, there's this new craze around Omachi, which is this opinionated distro built on Arch Linux. And this is by DHH, who's the founder of Ruby on Rails,
yeah.
right? So he's just gone all out on building this. It's a developer interface called Omachi.
DHH is opinionated, but what does an opinionated Linux distro mean? What does it mean for a Linux? I'm really curious. What does it mean?
So Linux is, and Ubuntu is what I used, maybe 20 years ago is what I was using. So that was my Linux distro when I was still playing around with Linux in those days. And it's pretty plain vanilla. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. But what DHH has done is, he has given you an operating system which he says it's going to be like Mac, right? So when you open it, it'll have everything set up. It'll have your email set up. It'll have your, Ruby on Rails, Docker, all those things will be there. Plus, you've got Signal built in. You can download WhatsApp. It'll be so everything is
solving the use case for how do you make Linux more usable for the average person so that they don't have to spend.
Coder.
I'm not saying your average. Again, I'm not implying that because you've been using it for many years. But I'm just saying that that's been one of
the
Linux's biggest issues. Right?
So what DHH has gone and done is he's built this thing called Omachi. It's just the rage everywhere. And so the challenge for me, and this is the reason why I couldn't do it. First of all, I used Linux last, I want to say 20 years ago. The very first email system of Trilegal was set up on Linux. We used to use Thunderbird in those days. And then, we went into Microsoft because clients demanded it. And we are all very much a Microsoft shop right now.
Teams collaboration, etc. happens on Teams?
All sorts of things. I mean, we use Slack, we use Teams, so it's quite diverse. But we're a very simple Exchange setup, Microsoft Office 365, etc. So I haven't used Linux for a really long time. And I've never used
where are you
Linux.
setting this up on?
So the challenge that I set myself after seeing DHH was I've got an old Mac, a MacBook, very old, I think a 2012 MacBook. And he says you can just load it up on this and it'll work. And of course I thought I'd do that. So I got a USB and I stuck the USB in. And then of course it didn't recognize the Wi-Fi router. So I didn't have the drivers for the Broadcom router for this particular version.
Which is again a very common Linux issue, which is specific old drivers.
And he was supposed to do everything in this ISO that you just flash onto a pen drive and you do. So I did all of that stuff. And then, of course, if you don't have the Wi-Fi router, you can't do anything else after that. So then I opened ChatGPT and I spent half a day with ChatGPT, literally going through shell commands, downloading stuff, tethering my phone. Thoroughly enjoyable. I've not had so much fun for 20 years. But at the end of it, I've got Omachi running on my MacBook, resurrected the MacBook. It's super fast. It's great fun. Later on today, I'm planning to flash this onto a Mac Mini in the office and see how life works. But this is one of those things where I really had to use some helper. And the other way to have done it would have been to go on Discord and then go through all of Discord and try and figure it out. It's too much of a pain. But this was so good because ChatGPT really took me through it. And then something wouldn't work and say, okay, can you just type this out and tell me what the answer is? And then I tell them the answer. Okay, so now this is your problem. And so now you have to do this. And bit by bit, it took me half a day. Right. But I installed Omachi. I'm very proud of myself for doing that because, I'm very rusty in this kind of stuff.
What triggered this? After 20 years, why did you want to do this? What gives you the joy in this?
Well, one is it felt easy to do because he just hyped it up saying all you have to do is put your flash drive in.
It turned out to be tough, but you enjoyed that toughness. That's what I'm trying to understand. It was tough, but you still enjoyed it.
Yeah,
why?
I sort of understood the commands that I was being asked to do. So
it's learning in that sense. It's like hands-on learning.
And I've always I've always, and this is sort of part of what the tech practice does, is we're like, look, don't be afraid of tech. You'll only learn tech if you sort of get in and sort of figure out how tech works. And I can't be talking about, for me, I can't be providing advice to a tech company if I don't understand the underpinnings of the way the tech works. I don't need to really code in Linux to be able to advise most of my clients, but it's nice to be able to understand the way these things work because you have a greater nuance in the way in which you'll advise people.
Are there any other non-standard LLM tools that you use? Like these are fairly common: ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. Is there anything specialized?
So of course there's Lucio, which is for a whole bunch of very specialized, only lawyer type things. I use Whisper a lot
for transcribing.
Dictation. Yeah.
In what context?
Just about. So even a lot of this chat with ChatGPT. Of course, I can use ChatGPT's native voice, but anywhere.
So you talk to the
Whisper is actually very good with. There are a whole bunch of these transcribing software, but any text box or any place where you can type, you can set up Whisper to dictate into that, and it's really helped me dictate things out in a stream of consciousness kind of way because, in a sense, what it does is it takes a look at that and cleans it up in a sense, takes the ums and ers out. Sometimes if you repeat yourself or you say, I made a mistake, it takes all of that out. It does a little bit more than just a transcription. And it presents it usually in your own voice in a sense. And it's very useful. It's made me more efficient in a lot of the things that I do.
Got it. Who are you outside of Trilegal and work? Who are you at? Who's Rahul Matthan? Matthan, my bad. The family man or at home?
Yeah, so
wife and son.
Now
Ahalya and Dhruv.
Alia and Dhruv. Physically speaking, only wife because we just dropped son off in college. So we're empty nesters as of a month.
What is he going to study?
So he's in the US, so he's a freshman, and I think that you declare your major only in a couple of years, but he's very interested in computational biology and systems biology and stuff like that. I don't think he wants to be a doctor, but he's very interested in sort of the CRISPR side of stuff, so that's what he's doing in college. Of course, we'll need to figure out where he eventually ends up. So look, obviously we're going to have to readjust to life in a sense as empty nesters. That's a bit of an adjustment. But I read a lot. That's one of the things that I think I've always done, and I do a lot of.
Physical books or Kindle?
Now physical books. I'm not agnostic to
fiction, non-fiction, both.
If it's fiction, it's almost only science fiction. Very rarely read anything else. If it's non-fiction, it's very eclectic. I read a whole range of things.
What's the most interesting science fiction that you can recommend? Or any which you'd recommend?
There are a bunch of... Look, Adrian Tchaikovsky is one of the finest science fiction writers right now. So he's very good. Cixin Liu, of course, Chinese science fiction is just outstandingly good. So those are the two really good ones. Right now, the book that I'm reading is... Gautam Bhatia has got a compilation of Indian science fiction, which I've just started reading. Between Worlds, that's the anthology. So that's another science fiction.
When is your time to read?
All the time. Whenever. If I'm on a flight, I'll be reading. I spend maybe 3 hours in the morning reading. So reading is very, very important to me, particularly the non-fiction reading. So, I don't read as much fiction as I read non-fiction, but I read a lot of non-fiction. I think...
And what's your non-fiction reading preferences like?
I read a lot in my area, which is in the tech area. So a lot of the AI non-fiction writing I've read. I'm also on the New India Foundation. So we'll do a lot of work on modern Indian history. So as in, post-1947 kind of history. I read a lot of that kind of book, but, very eclectic. I read Uh, I mean, I've read a really interesting book was a book called The Truffle Hound, which is about just the history of truffles all over the world, which you think is like in Alba, but Alba is the first chapter of the book, and then they go all over the world. How do you get truffles? And so just like interesting books, the Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
How do you reconcile? There is growing evidence over the years, exacerbated by AI, that reading and reading comprehension is falling in adults, especially among younger adults, as like especially longer novels, longer articles, etc., and stuff like that. Is that something that you ever thought about? That what happens to reading?
Well, look, it's hard to say what will happen generationally.
Did you observe that with your son as well? I mean, change of reading habits?
Yes, of course, without a doubt. I think the younger generation consumes knowledge in a different way, but that's not. It's not a generalization. And I don't want to say that one is better than the other. I didn't have YouTube when I was growing up, and so there are certain things that
our brains just got wired differently.
Our brains just got wired differently. Personally, I think that, and I'll speak personally for myself, I don't think, once again, it's what I said about the firm as well. There is a compounding value that kicks in at some point in time. And for me, the compounding in reading kicked in after a very long period of time. It's at that point in time when you just read so much that you start to then connect the things that different people across different genres of writing are saying. A philosopher says something which aligns with an economist, which says something that aligns with a biography of a scientist. And you start to see the world.
Emergence.
Yeah, but it's almost emergent. I mean, the knowledge is emergent. Each book has got nothing to do with the other. But because you've read it, and of course we have a tiny context window in our brain, right? So to even make the connection is very ephemeral. It's not like I'm actually connecting to a book that I read 20 years ago, but that's knowledge that's somehow stuck in my head, and it's become sharper in the context of something that I read yesterday. And I think I don't know if that can come in another way. I know that can come with my practice, which is the practice of reading. I've been maybe a decade. I used the Kindle. I've gone back to physical books, not for any other reason, but because it was harder to carry the books around in those days. I don't have to carry the books around that much. I just put like a book in my bag, and then so it's life has changed, and so I'm back to physical books.
Do you typically read one book at a time or multiple books at a time?
Yeah, I mean, I typically read one book at a time.
And are you the person who finishes all books if you start them, or do you feel comfortable just giving them up?
I have more books in my library than I will ever read right now. So there's a large pile of unfinished books.
But once you start, do you tend to finish?
I will try my best to finish, but I have no problems dropping a book that's not useful. I mean, I'm very careful about the books that I pick up. Usually, it's not from an algorithm. It's usually from an actual recommendation, typically from someone who I trust, and usually on the basis of what that person wrote about the book. So I've stopped using the algorithm to suggest things.
Your son Dhruv's already, left for college in some senses, but looking back at, let's say his, class 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, during that phase, what were the values you as a parent were most hoping to inculcate, strengthen in him?
Well, I think 10th is already too late, quite frankly. You've got to inculcate values in kids much earlier. I think by the time you've got to 11th and 12th, I don't think they really... they have other inputs that will shape their values more than just the parents. I think you've got to do it much earlier. And, one of the inputs that I hope I've shaped from him, of course, only time will tell these things, is... to be self-reliant. I think that's like super important. I think he is certainly more privileged than I was, in the same way as my parents were more privileged than their parents were, and that sense of privilege, or that comfort that comes from this increasing generational prosperity is something that perhaps could lull you into a false sense of security or comfort, which I don't think is healthy. And so the idea that he has to make of his life what he can make of it, independent of, what, of course, we will offer him our social capital, we will put him through as good a college as we can put him through. But beyond that, everything he has to make on his own. And he has to make it. He's not going to inherit the firm. As I told you, there's no way you can inherit this firm. We've built it such that it cannot transfer generationally. And I think that would be the one thing that I think he knows very clearly that he has to do. I'm quite confident, even with the way he's gone about the selection of the college that he wants and the thing that he wants to do, and watching the things that he's doing there, trying to figure out. He wants to get into a frat, but why does he want to get into a frat? Because that allows him to sit with people who are senior to him, who can actually help him figure out, some internship opportunities that he has. Very glad to hear all these things, because he's already started to think of
resourcefulness.
Also to think beyond the 4 years that he has in college. It'll be nice to actually figure out what happens after that. And so at least that value seems to have fallen on him. And then, of course, just integrity and stuff like that, right? You have to be respectful. You have to grow up in society. He calls my mother, even though he's there. He doesn't have to, because it's a grandmother, but he'll still spend the time calling his two grandparents. Those sorts of things, staying in touch and doing these things on your own without really being asked to do it, is the sort of stuff that I'm glad that he's doing, because you can only hope that you've imparted the values. You'll have to see whether it actually works.
All right. My last question to you is, you're into coffee. What's your current coffee setup, and what's your current coffee recommendation?
Oh, God.
Are you an espresso drinker? What's your preferred method of coffee?
So I am recently the owner of a Flair 58 2+.
What is that?
So the Flair is a very manual espresso machine. It's got a long
is it like
lever.
one of those pump action ones which gradually extract espresso without any kind of electrical?
So we have electrical, because you've got a chamber which you heat. So as you know, since you're
Right.
also a coffee person, there's a trio that you have to think about: the grind size of the coffee, the actual pressure that you put, and the temperature. And all these three variables, because they are highly variable, will determine the quality of the extraction of the espresso that you have. And in a traditional espresso machine, which I know you have, I don't know which one you have, but you probably have a double boiler setup. And if it has a double boiler setup, the pressure is taken out of the equation, because you set that pressure. Correct. And then whatever the pressure is, and you can, in the more complicated ones, you can actually set a profile for the pressure to do a pre-infusion, the actual pressure for the extraction, and you can taper it off towards the end. But most of them, you just have a set 12 bar pressure and you can pull it out. And then everything depends really on the grind size, because you got to get the right grind size such that if you put 18 grams of coffee beans, you extract 36 grams worth of espresso out of this setup in 30 minutes. And that's sort of 30 seconds. That's sort of the gold standard for everyone. But in the Flair, actually, pressure is also a variable, because the pressure is manual. You push down on a lever with your hand, and you've got a pressure gauge, which basically you should get above 9 bar and not more than 12 bar. But the beautiful thing about this is, if you've messed up on your grind size, which is the variable, if you're too fine, then it's going to take longer.
You just control the pressure that you apply.
Control the pressure with the hand. And it's all very tactile. It's great fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I know I'll probably get better if I get a proper espresso machine where I've got standard pressure coming out.
But that's just a slippery slope. From there, it goes on to then why not just get a fully automatic where you press a button and the machine does all the work as well.
So that's what I did actually. I went and got a Budon fully automatic, and I just hated the coffee that was coming out. It was not. And so now, we have a common friend, Gautam John, who's sort of our drug dealer. He's constantly supplying me with new coffees that he's got from wherever. And so now as a result, I feel that I must repay it. So whenever I go, I pick up coffee for him, and I'm sure you'll get some coffees around the way. So there's this whole subculture that's happening here where we are all getting coffees. So look, I mean, I'm still experimenting with my exact
So what's your
thing.
coffee recommendation then? Which is your current favorite coffee blend from India?
So for a long time, I've been using Mark's coffee from Oroville. And he must be wondering where I've gone, because now that Gautam's introduced me to a whole range of other stuff, I haven't been, buying from him as often as I did. But I can't remember what the name is. Gautam sent me something from Bombay,
Bougie.
which is what's currently. So because I've got, I don't have a hopper, so I can change my coffees around each shot.
Right.
So I
Single dose.
I am a single doser. I've got a D64, so it's a proper single doser, and it's one of the three in my rotation right now. And of the three, I really like it. So that's a really nice one, and it might stick. But Mark's coffee has always been good for me. I think, when you get into this, you start getting the light roasts and the medium roasts. And I've got one now in my rotation which tastes too much of strawberry. You can taste all these other things.
Right.
And I'm realizing that, I like my coffee to taste like coffee.
So you don't like the fruity coffees?
I don't mind it at all, to be quite honest. But it can't stop being coffee. Right now, this is smelling like a fruit juice. So, that's not my... So now I'm starting to realize what I don't like. So certainly this one, and this is one of those that I bought and shared with Gautam. So it's not his fault at all. I want to be completely clear. This is something I picked up in Cleveland when I dropped my son off, actually. And I think I like the medium to dark roast. I like it to taste like coffee. But I do like it. A good espresso has got a nice range of different things. But don't forget that you're a coffee at the end of the day. Don't try and sell yourself like a fruit juice. I think that's where I would draw the line.
Thank you so much, Rahul. It's been such a wonderful chat. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for taking all this time.
If you've been a long-time listener of the podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world that by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Mixing and mastering for the episode was done by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. This is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.